Good evening. Welcome to the Salem Area Mass Transit District's Board of Directors meeting for June. Today is June 24th. We're meeting in the Senator Hearing Room at Courthouse Square. I'll call this meeting to order. And for the first time in a very long time, we are all present and accounted for in the building. So very exciting to be here. And with that, that is our noting of the attendance. And so we'll move on to the next item of the agenda, which is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I've asked Director Bush to lead us in that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Director Bush. Next, we have the safety moment, and General Manager Pollock has that.
Thank you. In case you haven't heard, it's going to be very warm this weekend. So my safety message is focusing on heat injury prevention. So some tips to help you get through this weekend. Wear appropriate clothing. Choose lightweight, light-colored, loose-fitting clothing. Stay cool indoors. Air-conditioned places as much as possible. Schedule your outdoor activities carefully and try to do them in the non-peak heat times of the day. Wear sunscreen. Do not leave children in cars. Stay hydrated. Drink plenty of fluids. Replace your salt and minerals. Keep your pets hydrated and try to avoid any hot and heavy meals. And most importantly, stay informed. Check the weather. To watch it. It is expected to hit record temperatures Saturday and Sunday, and I believe also into Monday. So important to hydrate this weekend.
Thank you, General Manager. Next, we have announcements on the agenda. The first of which is that I'm adding an item to, it will be Agenda I-1, where we'll briefly discuss the letter of support that you should all have concerning parking minimums in the City of Salem's Unified Development Code. We'll talk about that more in a moment. But before we continue on, I wanted to also take a moment to make an announcement that I'm very excited to make, which is that thanks to our federal delegation, we have received a $6.3 million grant to purchase battery electric buses, which once they arrive, they will complete our electric bus corridor. So as a reminder, Route 11, which is our longest bus route, will now be a fully electrified bus corridor. So fantastic news. I know staff are working to figure out if we can place to expand the order that we already have in place with Gillig to see if we can get all of the buses at once, which would be fantastic. In either case, I'm really excited to see this happen. A news release about this just came out. And so very, very exciting. And it's, I think, one more step forward on our direction of heading towards being a zero emission fleet. So
can we applaud? I mean,
yeah. Please.
Thank you, President Davidson. I would just add to that. So you should probably start seeing the announcements come out tomorrow. We were notified from our federal delegations. Senator Merkley and Representative Schrader's office reached out to us and let us know. They issued press releases, and we expect the official FTA announcement tomorrow. So that is good news, and to echo your words, I'd like to thank the staff. We'll do it more formally once it's official, and our federal delegation and our help with CFM, who helped work the process for us back in DC.
Great, thank you. Next, we have a report out on our year-end review video. We were planning on doing a presentation on that due to some technical difficulties. I will encourage everyone that may be tuning in to go to youtube.com/Cherriots to check out the year-end review video. It's also available on Twitter and Facebook, but I'd like to invite General Manager Pollock to speak to that.
Sure, I'm going to ask Stephen Custer to come on, please, and introduce the video and make a few comments about how people can see it.
Yes, thank you, General Manager Pollock and President Davidson. And before I talk about the video, I'd like to take a moment to personally thank and congratulate Director Krebs and Director Bush on their service to Cherriots. We'll hear more from them in a moment, but for this video, thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. I do apologize. We did test the video, and for some reason it's not working with Zoom tonight, but typically we produce an annual report to provide information on our mission, guiding principles, and achievements in the past year. This is a printed annual report, but the disruption brought on by a global pandemic halfway through our 2019-2020 fiscal year offered us an opportunity to go in a different direction. So we brought in Skyline Video Productions to create a year in review video based on a script by Patricia Feeney, our Director of Communication. And I'd like to thank Board President Ian Davidson and General Manager Pollock for their time and commitment to this project. We took a different lens at how Cherriots managed the COVID-19 crisis, and I'm very proud with how it turned out. And as President Davidson said, you can view it on youtube.com/Cherriots or any of our social media channels on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So please do take a moment. It's a very inspirational and powerful video, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Custer. Any questions for Mr. Custer? I just want to say kudos. It's really well done, with the exception of the voiceover at the beginning and the man walking just aimlessly in the park. Otherwise, excellent. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, if I could, I would like to add, we showed it to the employees this afternoon, debuted it in my GM roundtable, and I told the group after watching it, I think it's my fourth or fifth time I've seen it, and I still get goosebumps watching it. During COVID, you're in it day to day, you're just trying to make it through, but when we have this opportunity to step back and look at what has happened and what Cherriots did, it is phenomenal. The Team Cherriots did an outstanding job to keep this community moving for those that needed transit through once in a generation pandemic. And so I'm real proud of Team Cherriots. And the video really does capture the mood and the feeling and the work. It was a great representation. Thanks to Stephen and the marketing communication team for their work.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Custer.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to invite Director Krebs on up, and then Director Bush in just a moment. So as has been noted, Director Krebs is leaving us here in July 1. So assuming you can hear me, wanted to recognize Director Krebs' many years of service. I don't know what this is officially called when you hit all of the officer seats. I'm going to call it a hat trick, but it is impressive, the years that you have put into serving our community. You have made our community better for it. So thank you very much, Director Krebs.
Thank you.
And we also have this very sweet hat. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then Director Bush, come up. While Director Bush has served numerically fewer years, I think she puts us to shame on how in the community she is and her many hours of service. And so wanted to also recognize Director Bush. While she's done serving us on the Salem Area Mass Transit District, she will be serving the Kaiser Fire District come July 1. So grateful to still have her serving the community. And I'd like to invite Director Krebs and Director Bush to make comments if you'd like to maybe reflecting on your years of service. Director Krebs.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank a lot of people. There's so many people to thank that I can't name them all, but I could start with the people that elected me to serve in this office, and they had enough faith that they put me here 3 times. Also, the professional staff at Cherriots, who did a great job of keeping the system running for so many years. I mean, we sit up here and we do the policy work, but many of those people are in the trenches and making the buses run every day and keeping the system out there for our community. I especially want to thank our general manager, Alan Pollock, and our administrative assistant, Linda Gallazzi, because both of these people have been real helpful to me in the positions I've held here on the board, and they continue to be very strong supporters of the community. This is sort of a bittersweet moment for me because I have been in the passenger transportation and tourism industry for 52 years, and I'm sort of phasing out now because of my age. So again, I would like to thank everybody that supported me. Also, I'm not going into oblivion. I hope to serve on the new streetcar committee, and also will be working for transit advocacy and also intercity passenger advocacy. So I'll still have a few things going on in the future, and I would like to wish the board and the new members coming onto the board the best luck in keeping this vital system operating for our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Krebs. Director Bush?
Okay. Well, you know, I'm not a person of few words. So it's hard to put it down, so I did. So hopefully I don't cry. Connecting people with places has been my tagline, and it was a wonderful time that we had at the Kaiser Chamber the other day. We all said that. And, oh, guess what? Connecting people with places. Anyway, it's been a motivation that has led me to connect to many people who in turn have been motivated towards improving the public transportation system in the Mid-Willamette Valley and beyond. Because of all of these connections, Cherriots has been changed for the better. I dedicate my remarks to several who have recently passed from the Cherriots team: Rachel Bunting, Ralph Starkweather, who are Cherriots operators, and Jerry Thompson, former board member and beloved mentor. Please also remember those who have passed from the pandemic and social unrest of the past months. Also, during my tenure, I dedicate this time to my husband's parents, Robert and Sedelia Bush, and my mother, Shirley McLaughlin, who have also passed during my tenure. They left leaving legacies of service that encouraged numberless people, and so I serve. And in no particular order, I want to mention ways that have connected me to the constituents of Kaiser and Salem and people who are part of the Cherriots team in order to say thank you. Former board members Marcia Kelly, Jerry Thompson, John Hamill, Kathy Lincoln, Steve Evans, Doug Rogers, Hirsch Sangster. Thank you, General Manager Pollock. Mayors Kathy Clark, Chuck Bennett, Kaiser City Councilors, members of all the committees that we're part of, SCATS, OMPOC, Mid-Willamette Area Commission on Transportation, Special Transportation Improvement Fund, Special Transportation, I can't remember the other one. STFAC. And the Citizens Advisory Committee. And I thank Stephen Dickey, David, Sue-Ann, Lori, Mike Jaffe, and all their work. I thank Marion County Commissioners Brent Tannen, Cameron, Willis, Carlson, and Bethel. I thank our neighborhood associations. From there, people get started. I was part of the House Bill 2017 Rules Advisory Committee, just at least watching. I thank our Senator Thatcher, Representative Post, and Raquel Moore Green. She has been an inspiration. Our CFM lobbyists, our federal delegation, some things I got to participate in, the Iris Fest, bus rodeos, those were wonderful. Budget committees and trainings, thank you, Wendy. Coffee with Kathy, thank you, Patricia. Employee banquets, our operators and customer service teams. Executive sessions, we have to have those. Various luncheons and dinners and breakfasts with local nonprofits. Kudos to Lisa, Roxanne, Kiki, Melissa. The Salem City Club, states of the cities we're part of and states of the county. We're all part of this, every one of us. Kaiser and Salem and Woodburn Chamber of Commerce meetings, riding the bus on the holiday parade. That was good, thank you, John. Saturday service is here, Sunday is coming. The Latino Business Association Alliance, thank you, Stephen, for your work there. The elections that we went through, ribbon cuttings, and now we get to say yay for electric buses, for our IT programs. Thank you for all of your teamwork during the pandemic, wildfires, ice storms, suspicious packages. And thank you for the awards received. A huge, huge, huge thank you to Linda. Question after question after question. So these and all more represent people connecting with people, trying to make our spot on this earth a better place to live and love. Thank you for allowing me to be a liaison at the Cherriots table, the constituents and all of you. I came from a place of total fear and trembling at the daunting task I was asked to do. And I go to the next adventure with many friends and a better understanding and love for this type of service. The public transportation system isn't just about the big blue, used to be red bus. It's about people. The fiber places called Kaiser and Salem and Turner and Monmouth and Dallas and Silverton and beyond. Honored to be connected to you. I thank my husband, Bob, and our children and their families, our 7 daughters and our 5, almost 5 grandchildren, 4, 1 on the way, for their support of me in this work. And I think I found an answer, Lydia, for what to do after the homeschooling was done. Thank you, Lord, for helping me do all of this, and thank you.
Thank you, Director Bush. And as Director Krebs so eloquently said, you are not going off into oblivion. So we're very grateful for all of the service that you've done and also for the service that you will yet contribute to the community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next is public comment, and I wanted to make note of receipt of 2 pieces of public comment. The first is from Alan Scott, which we received and put in the board packet that was sent out. And then the second is from Bradley Sevier, which we've also received and I believe was sent as an email, I believe yesterday. And so wanted to both Alan and Bradley, wanted to note that we have received it, we have reviewed it, and then I've asked staff to respond to your public comment. And so thank you for being engaged, thank you for caring, and keep it coming. With that, we have the budget hearing. So I will open up the budget hearing, and then I will invite Kathy Lincoln, the chair of the Budget Committee, to make some opening remarks. You're muted, Kathy.
Okay now?
Yep.
Thank you, President Davidson and members of the board. It's nice to be with you this evening. As chair of the Budget Committee for Salem Area Mass Transit District, I am pleased to present you with an approved budget for fiscal year 2021-22 with the Budget Committee's recommendation to adopt the budget. Thanks go to both the elected members and the citizen volunteers for their service on the Budget Committee. The attention to detail and insight of all the committee members made the process productive and efficient. I'd also like to thank General Manager Alan Pollack and his great hardworking staff, especially his newly elected budget person. Thank you, Denise. The district's fiscal year 22 budget includes appropriated funds at $75.3 million and unappropriated and reserve amounts at $36.4 million for a total of $111.7 million. This budget will allow for a full service level, expanding to Sunday service next fall, as well as holiday service. We're all looking forward to that. The Director's General Fund of $46.3 million includes property tax revenues, fair revenue, and various state and federal grant sources. The general fund will provide approximately 209,520 annual vehicle revenue hours, an increase over last year. The Transportation Program Fund of $10.4 million includes state and federal grant funds and a local contribution from the general fund. The Transportation Program Fund pays for services provided by the district other than the Cherriots local fixed route service. These services include the Cherriots Paratransit Service, Regional Service, Cherriots Call Center, Trip Choice, and Mobility Management. State and federal grant funds also provide for an $18.7 million capital projects fund. Major capital projects for fiscal year 2022 include the purchase of the district's first zero-emission buses, yay! Completion of a comprehensive IT system for the district's buses, new software implementation in Cherriots Finance and Human Resources departments, and planning for the South Salem Transit Center. The fiscal year 22 budget will allow the district to offer a full year of expanded service with the resources to attract and maintain a quality workforce, which we are very proud of. The district will continue to collaborate with federal, state, and local partners to identify funding to support public transit and infrastructure and work toward more effective and efficient public transit services in the Salem-Keizer area. It was a pleasure chairing the Budget Committee. I look forward to the increasing influence and vitality of public transit in our community. I want to thank you all for your hard work and commitment to this project, to this service. And I also am so happy to hear that we're going to have some more electric buses coming in the near future. Thank you so much for all your hard work.
Thank you very much, Chair Lincoln. With that, we'll go ahead to the deliberation portion, though I will note here that, good point. Here, I'll note that we have not received written public testimony and there are no members of the public here, though if there are any hiding, now is your chance. Okay, none have presented themselves. And so with that, we'll
Is there anyone virtual?
Oh, is there anyone virtual? Ross? Okay, great, thank you. So no members of the public. So with that, we'll go ahead and conclude the public comment portion, and then we'll proceed to the deliberation portion of the budget hearing. And I'll note before a motion is made that if there's any questions, Director LaRue, the CFO of Cherriots, is available for questions if we have any. So I'm going to close the budget hearing and then open the budget deliberation. Still getting used to this.
We need a motion.
Yes. Director Krebs, would you please make a motion?
I move that the board adopt resolution number 2021-06 to adopt the fiscal year 2021-22 budget, making appropriations and imposing and categorizing taxes.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Thank you to both of you. Is there any discussion on the motion? Director Carney.
I think I got this right.
You have to press and hold down while
Okay.
you're speaking and then release.
And then release?
So just press and hold.
Oh, got it. Okay, I think I'm on board now. Thank you, President Davidson. I just want to thank the members of our Budget Committee, and in particular, Budget Committee Chair Kathy Lincoln, for their contributions and their service to the district. And I'm really excited about the budget moving forward and pleased to see what we can get done with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Carney. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, Ms. Kaliazi, could you please do a roll call vote? Actually, no, we're all present. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. That closes the deliberation of the budget hearing. Next on the agenda is the consent calendar. If there's no issues with the consent calendar, would someone please make a motion? Director Krebs.
I move we adopt the consent calendar.
Okay, we have a motion. Second. Director Richards with a second. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion?
Can I just make a comment?
Please.
I don't have to pull anything. I appreciate the work that was done for the 5310 funds and then the extra money that came for our community on the, what is it called, CRISA? CRISA funds. And the work that was made to make those decisions and appropriate those. I appreciate that. And the continued work that we do in partnership with United Way in providing those bus passes to those who need those in our community.
Agreed. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing no opposed, the consent calendar is unanimously approved. And then we will proceed to the informational reports with an update on the South Salem Transit Center project.
I'll ask Steve Dickey, our Director of Technology and Program Management, to open up this report.
Good evening, President Davidson, members of the board. This is an update on our South Salem Transit Center project. If you remember, in March, on March 25th, we had our initial update on this project, which was to provide information on what the work that Parametrics, our consultant, was going to be doing as they embarked on the site selection study and exploring where we would like to locate this facility and the general characteristics of the facility. Tonight, we have Ryan Farncombe with Parametrics here to bring an update on where we are, and he's going to be able to provide information on what we learned during this first phase, which was the study of a number of plans, evaluation of the development perspectives of where residential and commercial development will happen over the next 20 years, and our service that will be needed to meet the needs resulting from that development. And Ryan will bring a report on what they learned, but also introduce the next steps, of which involve talking about what we want to include in this new, really multimodal transit center. So with that, I introduce to you Ryan Farncombe one more time. Ryan?
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. And thanks, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to you again about this project. Just 1 second here while I pull up the presentation. And before I start, I should also mention that the presentation I'll be giving tonight is slightly different than the one that is, I believe, included with your packets. And we'll make sure to get that to you. And just 1 second here. Okay, so as Steve mentioned, we talked about this project back in March, earlier in the spring. And tonight, we wanted to provide an overview of the information we've been gathering over the first 6 months or so of this project. We have quite an extensive report available that provides much greater detail on some of the things I'm going to touch on here tonight. And that report is available on the project website, which is southsalemtc.org. So I'd like to present this information and then open it up to discussion and questions. And please, as we go through this, feel free to stop me if you have a question or clarification. So as Steve mentioned, again, we're planning for both a transit center and what we call a mobility hub. The mobility hub piece of this is around incorporating new and emerging mobility options such as bike share or opportunities for Uber and Lyft, pick up and drop off, car share, and other new mobility options that will be coming down the road. We're looking to facilitate with this transit center better crosstown transit, looking to serve the growing neighborhoods in the south part of Salem, and like I said, integrate these new mobility options into this transit center as best we can. So we're in the first two and a half bullets on this screen. One of the first things that I'll be talking about here is we wanted to make sure we understood what the transit needs are now and likely into the future in our study area, because understanding what those transit needs are will have an impact on not just the size and function of the transit center, but also the ideal location for it. We've also engaged the public. We did quite an extensive survey, which I'll talk about. And now we're at the part of the project where we're starting to define the transit center and mobility hub amenities and the functions of the site. And a little bit later this summer, we'll develop a prototypical design. We will start to begin screening locations and identify those best candidate sites. In terms of schedule, we're right about on schedule from where we started. Here we are in June, like I said, just starting the prototypical design element. And I anticipate we'll be coming back to this group likely in the early fall to talk, to give another update. So again, the purpose of the transit market analysis I'm going to talk about here is to understand transit needs in the study area and document existing conditions for our work, but also gather baseline information that is going to be very important to citing the transit center, such as zoning and land use. So we did, I'm going to touch on some of this here, but we did quite a bit of analysis looking at the existing transit network, looking at demographics, both in our study area and in other neighboring areas. We did an extensive look at private development activity. We're also looked at using the regional travel model, current and likely future travel behavior, which all helps inform this effort. And last but not least, we also have our feedback from the survey, which both informs siting, but also the discussion around what the transit center looks like and how it functions. So that's, maybe this is a little bit hard to see on your screen, but our study area is, although there's a line here, it's a little bit loosely defined. It's basically South Salem, and really a focus on Commercial and Liberty, south of downtown. So as part of our initial effort, we wanted to make sure we understood all the existing plans and policies that are on the books here today. We looked at travel demand information, and of that analysis, I think one of the key findings was that there is anticipated future growth in travel to the industrial areas that are southeast of Kubler that are growing now. We also looked at projected employment and population growth, and in our study area, there's forecast to be modest growth compared to the rest of the region. And we also looked at the existing pedestrian and bicycle system. I think we all recognize that transit is only as good as the access to it. And in large part, the network is complete for both pedestrians and cyclists, though I will say it's not always comfortable. As in, there may be bike lanes on the arterials, but we know that kids are not going to be comfortable biking on them. We also took a look at the existing transit landscape out there, which I'm sure is very familiar to you. And on the screen there, you can see we looked at ridership to understand where those highest ridership stops are. And again, I know I'm going through this information rather fast, and we do have plenty more detail available on the project website. In terms of demographics, what we found most interesting here is that in general, the demographics, the communities of concern in traditionally transit-dependent populations tend to be more outside of the immediate study area. But this is a really important finding because, as I'll talk about here in a second, a lot of the needs we see in terms of connections are off of the Lancaster and integrating with the Route 11. So this was important work to help us understand maybe not the needs in the study area itself, but also to areas that this transit center will facilitate connections to. We also conducted a study to understand how far folks can get on the transit system as it stands today. And this map here on the right shows an example of how far somebody could get on transit in different amounts of time. For example, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes. And this is starting at Commercial and Baxter. And the thing I want to point out here is that while there's very good access into South Salem and to downtown, as you can get there in about half an hour or 45 minutes, there is very little access to the Lancaster area east of I-5, which I just talked about. Another key element, land use and zoning. This is going to be very critical to the actual siting of the transit center. Fundamentally, a transit center needs to be something that is allowed by zoning code. And here we show quite a bit of commercial zoning along Commercial that does generally allow for transit center use. We've also had discussions with the City of Salem with the ongoing comprehensive plan update and impending code updates to talk about our project and the different allowed uses as they look at updating their zoning code. And this kaleidoscope map shows just kind of a snapshot of the recent development that's occurred in our study area and beyond. For example, those orange circles are all multifamily developments that have occurred along various corridors. And you can see that they're really concentrated along the commercial corridors where the zoning encourages that. You also note that off of Kubler here, several major industrial facilities having been built. The black circle around here means that those have been built in the last 10 years. But this is also important information for helping us understand where is activity concentrated when we're thinking about the transit system. So along with the data we've gathered, I mentioned we also conducted a survey. We sent this survey out to 7,000 households in South Salem, and we also sent it out to the email list, and we received about 600 responses to the survey. And some of the key findings, and there's quite a bit to unpack there in the survey report, which is also on the website. But about 50% of respondents said that Cherriots meets their travel needs. The top 3 priorities for improving service from the respondents was, I don't think any of this stuff is surprising to you, but more frequent service, having a bus stop that's closer, and faster travel times. The top trip purposes that came out of this, errands and shopping was the #1 use of Cherriots for folks that we reached with the survey, along with medical needs, recreation, and work as well. The work was down the list a little bit. Encouragingly, about 3/4 of folks said they feel good about a new transit center in general. And some of the desired amenities that we heard about were station amenities, things like benches and a shelter, which that totally makes sense. Restrooms, park and ride spaces, and the opportunity to purchase food and beverage. And I did want to mention with regard to park and ride spaces in particular, we looked deeper into the results on that and found that the folks asking for more park and ride spaces generally were very infrequent users of Cherriots. So that was just one correlation I wanted to mention. So what does this all mean for transit and the transit center more broadly? Land use, I think it's important to note that land use into the future is likely to stay the same, that the uses out there today will likely be the uses into the future. Commercial Street, Kubler, and Liberty really make natural corridors for transit service. In terms of serving traditionally underserved communities, we see an opportunity to connect South Salem more to that Lancaster area where the 11 serves. And there's good bicycle and pedestrian access in much of the study area, which is great for transit. Although, as I mentioned, the facilities on arterial streets can be more uncomfortable for those walking or cycling or using mobility devices. One of the key needs we saw from this was serving employment and population growth, especially in that area, in the industrial area south and east of Kubler. And south of Kubler, in the study area, our team talked about considering a demand response or microtransit to serve the more single-family nature of that part of South Salem, or maintaining or considering modifications to the existing fixed routes to serve the future transit center. So before I move on to talk a little bit more about the transit center design and features itself, and actually we have some discussion topics for you, I'm curious if there are any questions or comments.
Are there any questions? Director Carney.
Thank you, President Davidson. A couple questions. One is, did we collect any demographic information when we got back the survey results from people? And are we able to take a look at that so we know how that aligns in terms of an overall representation of our community and its transit riders?
Yeah, thanks for that question. We did collect demographic data, though I believe we typically make it optional because not everybody wants to provide that information. And it is available in our report, and regretfully I don't have it right in front of me. But I could pull that up and we can get that information to you offline as well.
Thank you. I just like a big shout out for restrooms at a transit center as somebody that travels in the company of small children quite frequently. I can give a big thumbs up on that. And my last question has to do with the nature of Kubler. I can certainly agree that it's a very important arterial to our community, but it doesn't necessarily seem transit friendly due to its limited connectivity with the streets that surround it. So could you help me understand why Parametrics chose to highlight that as important to the placement?
Yeah, and I should also clarify, when we talk about Kubler, we're mostly talking about Kubler east of Commercial. And I agree that the street as is not terribly transit friendly in many ways, but it does make for a good connection to that Lancaster area and to the industrial areas in particular. So I think it's more, Kubler is more of a, where the bus will be using it to get to other destinations that are more transit friendly rather than serving a lot of transit users on Kubler.
Thank you.
Other questions? Director Nguyen.
I can also provide the sample size for that survey results too. That would be great, along with the demographics. Appreciate it.
Were you able to hear that, Mr. Farncombe?
I'm sorry, I wasn't able to hear the question.
Sorry, the question was, when you send the demographics, can you also send the universal, the universe size, the number of respondents for the survey?
Yes. Yes, definitely.
Other questions? Director Richards.
Yeah, I live out that way along Kubler there. And I'll tell you, the thing that most people haven't watched is the size of the senior centers that are going in out there. There's a new one that looks to be almost ready to start making it a building. And it is gigantic. It must be 500, 600 people, rooms in that place. And then you've got two more just on the other side of the freeway there. I spent 5 years trying to keep that road being very quiet little road so you go to our church, which is Morning Star out there, but we lost. And but there's going to be a lot of people, and there's going to be a lot of time. One of the facilities out there puts 800 cars on that road every 3 hours. There's 800 cars, so I don't know. It's amazing. It's so big. I feel little when we drive out there because there's these giant machines that are, not the kind you see normally.
Thanks, Director Richards.
Right.
I've got a few questions. One is I'm wondering if you could talk about the interplay that you're having with the city as you're beginning this research.
Yeah, we've had one conversation so far, about 2-3 weeks ago with several city planning staff, really making sure that the goal of that initial conversation was really making sure that we totally understand what the zoning code does or does not allow in the different zones, especially along those arterials. Whether a transit center and related features is a outright permitted use or if it's a conditional use, those kind of things. And then the second part of the conversation, and this is the ongoing piece that I know we're going to keep talking with the city about, is or as they update their zoning code and they look at the allowed use tables and related things like that, there's a conversation to be had about where a transit center or related facilities are allowed in different zones. And so this is kind of a good time in many ways to have that conversation because there's the opportunity to, perhaps modify which zones, for example, allow transit center and related uses outright versus a conditional use.
Great, thank you. During your presentation, you mentioned that you were using a regional travel model. Could you help me understand what that is?
Yeah, and I actually took a graphic out that showed it a little bit more. But the regional travel model is maintained by SCATS, and it is a model of all regional travel behavior, both now and into the future. And so what we're able to do is take the travel model and look at, I believe our target year was 2040 or 2045. But the region takes future land use assumptions, future transportation system assumptions, and puts them into this model to be able to generate an estimate of where people will be going in the future. And so that is what we used to illuminate that there is an anticipated increase in travel to that industrial area southeast of Kubler from the South Salem study area.
And did I hear you correctly? You said that it was SCATS where the data was coming from?
Correct.
Okay, great. Perfect, thank you. And then my last question is, I'm hoping you could, I know you've already basically said this, but I'm maybe requesting you to say it again, is to make the case for why a transit center or a super stop will help with connectivity in particular, as opposed to just intersecting bus stops.
Yeah, and one of the things that a transit center or a super stop really unlocks is better transfer opportunities. And that is one of the primary benefits to facilitating, especially crosstown routes versus the current hub and spoke that this area is served by. The routes are going into downtown where folks transfer and then go out again. This provides a new opportunity for folks to transfer to routes and avoid having to go downtown, essentially, especially when we're talking about people going from South Salem to that Lancaster area, which right now on transit would require them to go downtown, transfer, and then go back out.
That makes sense. I'm hoping, I'm going to press you a little on that. So I live out in East Salem, and to access the 11, I take the 4 west, and then I hop off at a particular stop, and then I hop on the 11 to head north. So those are intersecting stops. The stop is a actual bus shelter. And so I'm hoping that you could articulate what makes a center better than a bus shelter. I'm pretty sure I understand it, but I want to make sure that we have it on the record. Because I've been getting quite a few questions about, well, why do we need a transit center down south?
Well, besides, you guys, can folks still hear me?
Yep. We just lost the presentation. You're still there.
Okay. So beyond the opportunity to make better and easier connections that aren't possible now, a single bus stop does not provide the amount of space needed to have multiple buses queuing and picking people up and dropping people off, right, that a transit center or a mobility hub unlocks. And additionally, the mobility hub piece of this in particular, I think, will help increase access to transit in a much more substantial way than just bus stop improvements, right? The intent here is to be able to not only create a good transfer environment, but also truly make it way easier and convenient for people to be able to get to that transit center on a whole bunch of different modes, whether it's getting an Uber and getting dropped off at the transit center, grabbing a scooter and leading it there, or parking their bike for the day.
Great, thank you. That is exactly the answer I was hoping for. Thank you. Any other questions?
Comment.
Director Bush.
I just appreciate where we are finally getting to get this done. It's been years and some stops and starts, and I just wanted to say that you guys are going to do a great job.
Thank you, Director Bush. We have a question from our budget chair who's still tuning in. Ross, could you maybe read it for us? Or I'm happy to read it.
The question
Use
the
Director
question in
Fred.
the chat box is, are you working with the city of Salem on this study, in particular regarding the lack of safe, comfortable bike and pedestrian facilities? Does the city have someone dedicated to working on this plan with Cherriots?
Mr. Farncombe, were you able to hear that?
I heard the first part. The question was, are we working with the city on the project? I'm sorry, I didn't catch the second piece.
Second piece is if the city has a dedicated staff person that's liaising with us, and if the city is taking steps to address some of the safe connectivity, like the bus lanes that you identified, or bike lanes that you identified.
Steve, did you want to answer about the?
Yes, President Davidson, members of the board. The city is being involved on a regular basis, and depending on what the area that we're looking at will depend on the primary person that we work with. And in regard to zoning, we are working with their zoning and planning people. In regard to some of the street design and right-of-way and bicycle and pedestrian facilities, we're working with the people that work in particular with that. One of the things that we do have is a standing monthly meeting with City of Salem staff, and we have people from each of those areas present for those meetings, and this is a standing item on the agenda for those meetings. And so this is something that we do address those issues on a regular basis. And I would also like to speak just a little bit to the question about why we would need a center in the South Salem area. One of the challenges that we face right now with the topography and the street design in South Salem is the ability to provide the coverage needed to maintain service in and around the residential, especially the residential development out there, by utilizing the large transit coaches that we typically see on our main corridors. And in doing so, we consume quite a bit of our available resource of provision of service and operating those large coaches in areas that still don't provide a coverage the same way that we could do through microtransit and in partnerships with other mobility providers. And the purpose and the design of this transit center, and I just want to remind the board of this, is this is going to be a different type of center than your typical transit center that we have constructed in the past, in that it will be a mobility center where people coming, whether they're on a bike or walking or are being dropped off by someone driving them, or are carpooling, or an Uber or a microtransit, public transit demand response service, or our large fixed route bus, can come together and have a convenient and safe place for the interconnectivity between all of those modes. And the other piece of it is by freeing up some of those large route resources that do operate along the Lancaster corridor and some of the crossing arterials, that relieves some of the resources that we have that we're consuming right now, trying to use those for coverage service to be assigned to other areas where they do work well, but we don't have the frequency nor capacity that we would like to see at this time. So the direct benefit, yes, is going to be in the South Salem area, but it will have reciprocal benefits throughout our system.
Thank you, Director Dickey. Any additional questions? I know Mr. Farncombe has additional slides for us, so go ahead.
Okay, great. Let me pull that back up just one sec. Okay. So again, the current phase of work we're in now is around defining what this transit center looks like and what sort of features and amenities it will have. And critically, right now, our phase of work is to make sure we understand these parameters so that we know how large of a site is going to be required. Not only that, we intend to prioritize different features of the site so that when we get around to looking at different locations and push comes to shove, maybe a site isn't as big as the ideal that we would like, we have a framework to work from to know what we might end up reducing in size or cutting to accommodate a given site. I also wanted to mention that we are going to ask the public specifically about the transit center and mobility hub features and needs later this summer. And once we have a prototype developed, we will take that and then develop site selection criteria to get us to home in on preferred sites for the facility. And here, this is a summary list of some of the features and amenities, not all of them, but I think these are mostly the ones that have a outsized impact on site sizing. You know, for example, one thing notice that's potentially conspicuously absent right here is around bus charging or electric bus equipment. That is something that our team is talking about, but definitely has less of an impact on the actual site sizing. Rather than rattle off this list of features, the highlighted items here are a couple of the things I wanted to bring to the board's attention. First, with regard to parking and park-and-rides, in our discussions with Steve and Cherriots staff, we've leaned towards saying that accommodating a large number of park-and-ride stalls is probably not a top priority. And given the large amount of parking that exists in many of the arterial corridors we're looking at, we prefer to look for opportunities for shared parking arrangements with adjacent properties. And then the other piece highlighted below, and we've already talked about this a little bit, is, and we heard from the survey that there was a desire for a customer restroom, but there's a lot of considerations that go along with that. And so that was another element that's a source of ongoing discussion. And so I'd be very curious for feedback or thoughts, advice from the board on these subjects in particular.
Any feedback? Director Carney.
Thank you, President Davidson. This isn't something you mentioned, but why would we need bays for 60-foot buses? I think our typical bus is 40 feet long. Are we anticipating getting some XLs in the fleet?
In our discussions with staff, there was the desire to build in the opportunity for the use of articulated buses in the future. And, 40-footers can still use those bays, but I think by providing a couple of bays for 60-footers, we're future-proofing the site and avoiding having to redo something later down the road.
Okay, that makes sense. I've already given my shout out on public restrooms, so I won't reiterate that. In terms of park and ride, I would agree that it doesn't seem like a huge priority to me until or unless there is a greater disincentive to drive to our central business district. For example, if we had priced parking throughout the downtown that was crowded and difficult to access, it might incent people to use a park and ride facility. But I know how far a state worker is willing to walk to avoid paying the parking on the state, in the state lots, because that's where I live, is about that line. And so I don't see a huge priority for those at this time. And also, once somebody's in their car, it's really hard to get them out again. So just get them on the bus in the first place, is my advice.
Director Bush.
Maybe a bit of a devil's advocate here. I'm thinking of, since we're also doing the Albany feasibility study, isn't that going to essentially be connected with the the South Salem Transit Center as well? So people could park there and then ride the bus to Albany or up the canyon or what, and do those long distance ones too. So it's not just, I don't think it's just for downtown purposes, it's for outside as well. Just like at the Kaiser Transit Center, people will stop there, leave their cars, and go on from there.
Director Dickey, do we have a sense of how often the Kaiser Transit Center's parking facilities are used presently?
Pre-pandemic, we were actually at and exceeding capacity pretty regularly, but it was not a lot of people using it for parking and then riding the bus. Because of its proximity to I-5 and an interchange, it was significantly being used by people using it for carpool and vanpool connections. And so that was the primary use of that. Now, that's not a bad thing. That's just a different use, and it doesn't tie in with the transit service. It just is another way of alleviating traffic on our roads by having that facility.
Please.
And that goes along well too with our transportation options program within Cherriots, carpool, vanpool, get your bikes out, get their program. So there's more connectivity that way.
Other points of discussion or feedback? Please.
Well, my only thought with like the park and ride situation, and I mean, if we end up using some of like those shopping centers or like the side streets, like they were saying, that it effectively could be the same thing without having to take up more space in our own like center.
And President Davidson, members of the board, one of the things to keep in mind at this stage of the process, we are looking primarily at what are the elements that will impact the size of a piece of property that we will need. There's a lot of other things. I saw that there were some comments about potentially like change machines or lockers or showers and those types of things. Those will be coming when we get to the more detailed design phase of specific elements, things like drinking fountains and signage and that level of detail. Well, where we are at in the process is really as the contract with Parametrics is for a site selection process. We're in that stage of determining use elements that will impact then the size and also access to and from the facility. But absolutely, we will be getting into all those other details as we move through this different phases of this project.
Please, Director Carney.
Thank you, President Davidson. Yeah, I would, to Director Hospressi's point, I think keeping the site more discrete in size as we're scoping this project to allow us more location options is of greater importance to me than considering a robust park and ride facility. And I'm gonna look down to that next line there and say, can you please put a cover over those bike racks? That would be really nice as well.
I would tend to agree with my colleagues here that I think, in fact, our next agenda item will probably lay bare some of my feelings about parking. But I would much rather have us, if funding is a zero-sum game, and it often is, I'd rather have funding allocated to prioritize other things than parking. And whether that's an additional transit center that we can couple with some additional funding, or, another 60-foot bay, whatever it is. Those are my thoughts, though I think we need to put the customer and the rider first, so I would strongly be in favor of customer restrooms. Other feedback? Okay. Mr. Farncombe, I think we are talked out on this subject. Do you have what you need?
I do. Thanks very much for that conversation. And just very briefly, my presentation will still work. I had a slide on next steps. As I said, we'll be engaging in this prototypical design process this summer and developing the siting criteria and analysis. And I expect to come back with another update to you probably early this fall.
Great. Thank you so much for your work on this. And thank you, Director Dickey, as well.
Thanks very much for your time.
Our next agenda item was actually the prior agenda item, which I breezed right over, which is agenda item I-1. So I will direct the board's attention to the draft letter of support that we have. I think the letter of support could use some work, which is why it's listed as draft. And I think instead of detailing or walking through some of the language of the draft, I wanted to maybe set the stage and then paint a picture of what I'm attempting to say with this letter. And so the City of Salem, as a result of the passage of House Bill 2001 in, I believe, 2019, it made some changes, or it is requiring cities to make some zoning changes. And as a result of those changes, the City of Salem is reconsidering some parking minimums for certain kinds of residential housing, specifically duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. So what the umbrella might be either middle housing or multifamily housing. So, and as you may recall, at the start of our packet, we have the fiscal year 2021 board principles and priorities list. And one of our adopted priorities and principles is the very last one. In fact, it's about unaccounted costs. And so what we have here is attention should be paid to policies that put the burden of costly infrastructure on the public when the number of individuals who would benefit is nominal. For example, parking minimums increase the cost of housing and commercial properties for everyone, but only drivers of automobiles benefit. And so as the City of Salem, one of our key partners is considering rewriting some of those rules. I would like to see us, as the transit provider, come out strongly in support of removing of parking minimums. And to illustrate that point, I'll use an anecdote because that conveys information pretty well. So in my neighborhood, as my wife and I, we were considering where to move, and we spent a lot of time looking at homes, and we started noticing that there were a lot of homes with RV pads. So it was an advertised feature. It was a premium. Hey, if you have a recreational vehicle, this house has an RV pad. And my wife and I, we don't own an RV. So it was not a selling point for us. So we did not end up purchasing a home that had an RV pad, whereas somebody else who had an RV would seek out a plot of land like that. And what our parking minimums end up doing is that it puts the cost of parking, it sets a minimum, says, each kind of duplex must have 2 parking spots, which ends up increasing the cost of housing for individuals that may not own a car or may not own 2 cars. And so just as how I am grateful that the city, or the county in my case, does not put a minimum for RV parking spots, I don't think that we should put a minimum for parking. And I'm enough of a capitalist to believe that the market will respond accordingly to the demands. And just as there are houses with RV pads, there will be houses with ample parking. And I think everyone can be served in that way. I don't think it's particularly helpful when, for instances like this, when government dictates that every single home, duplex, triplex, quadplex must have a certain number of parking, because sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not. And so those are my thoughts. And so with that, if the board agrees with me, I'd like permission to rewrite the letter that I have here to spruce it up a little bit, but then generally speaking, to be in support of recommending to the City of Salem's Planning Commission for the removal of parking minimums for those classifications of residential homes, which is their decision point that they'll be having either in July or in August at their next meeting. I think we could probably have a vigorous debate about whether or not we should remove parking minimums citywide, but that's not the question before the commission right now. Director Krebs.
I agree with you on that, and it goes counter to the environmental concerns, because when you put parking down, you put down impervious surfaces, and then you have runoff problems, and then there are other issues that you have to deal with. So if we can get away, reduce the amount of impervious surfaces, it helps with the greenhouse gas problems, and also a lot of times you don't need that superfluous pavement. So
Great.
I support what your goals are.
Thank you, Director Krebs. Others? Director Hinojosa-Presi.
I'm also in support. I mean, I think we dedicate far too much space to cars when we should be dedicating more space to our actual citizens that live here. In a perfect world, I would love that these would actually be like mixed use spaces, so then people wouldn't really have to walk any further because their grocery store could be underneath their apartment or something like that. But here we are, so yeah, I'm definitely in support of this.
Okay, thank you. Director Carney?
Thank you, President Davidson. Also strongly in support, and I would just point out for my fellow board members and for anyone listening, that as you suggest, it is a very market-driven response. Both House Bills 2001, both House Bills 2001 and the parking minimums. So just because we remove a parking minimum doesn't mean that someone can't construct a residence or a duplex or a triplex with parking included. The same way that just because House Bill 2001 will result in what would be considered an upzone for many properties that are currently zoned as single-family residential to now permit duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. Those duplexes, triplexes, those multifamily opportunities won't be built until the market makes that decision. So I believe very much in what you're suggesting, that yes, the market can make the decision, but we should not force the decision upon developers and the people that are then, forced to make the purchases and support the cost.
Great, thank you. Other thoughts?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, in which case, could someone please make a motion to authorize me to put together this letter of support on behalf of the board? Director Carney.
I move to allow President Davidson to compose a letter of support for removal of parking minimums for the Salem Planning Commission.
I think that does it. Great. We have a motion? Sorry.
Second?
Second, we have a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, motion passes unanimously. And then we'll go ahead and proceed to the general manager's report.
Thank you. So first, let me add on to the well wishes and thanks to both Director Krebs and Director Bush for their service on behalf of the greater Salem Kaiser community. As the general manager, it's great knowing that our board members are dedicated to advancing the mission of the district, and you both have done that exemplary, and thank you for your service. Next item I want to report is that the district will be joining what's called the Sustainable Transit for a Healthy Planet Challenge. In April, President Biden announced an ambitious goal that the United States would achieve a 50 to 52% reduction from the 2005 levels in economy-wide net greenhouse gas pollution in 2030. Subsequent to that, the Federal Transit Administration Administrator Nerio Fernandez launched a Sustainable Transit for Healthy Planet Challenge to encourage transit agencies to build on progress already made and to further reduce greenhouse gas emissions from public transportation to support President Biden's greenhouse gas reduction goal. The challenge calls on transit agencies to develop climate action strategies with measurable goals to achieve greenhouse gas emissions targets. All transit agencies nationwide, regardless of size or service area, are encouraged to develop climate action or sustainability plans that detail greenhouse gas reduction strategies, such as converting fleets to electric buses and making facilities more energy efficient. Throughout the remainder of this year and early 2022, the FTA staff will provide technical assistance to agencies that commit to developing climate action plans or other strategies. On Earth Day 2022, the FTA will showcase the impact of the challenge and transit agency success stories towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions. With that, in line with our climate action plan goals and sustainability efforts, we'll be joining the challenge as an agency. I'll report more on that as details develop. Just wanted to inform the board we're moving forward on that. Also, yesterday, the Rules Advisory Committee that is consolidating the STF and STIF programs commenced with the kickoff meeting, and the first meeting of the committee starts next week. We have 6 meetings scheduled for the next 2 months or so to provide recommendations to the OTC as we consolidate those 2 programs. And I serve on that committee, I guess I should say that. Yeah. Just a reminder, Monday, July 5th, there will be no transit service on that day as part of our pre-September implementation of Sunday and holiday service. Also, you're all aware of, but just a reminder, on Monday, the Customer Service Center reopens for business. That is 1 week ahead of fare collection and front door boarding to allow our customers to get their fare media ready to go for when we begin front door boarding and collecting fares beginning July 6th. And with that, that concludes my general manager's report.
Great. Thank you, General Manager Pollock.
I have a question on
Please.
the timing of the opening. So when the customer service center opens for purchasing fares, can you do that as well as the other places that sell fares? Like Shemeketa or?
Roths.
You know,
Roths
I
or
don't know the answer to that. My hunch is, I believe.
I'm getting
customer
signaled
service-
that yes, you can.
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
Yes, Shemeketa has not gotten back to us about whether they're going to start next week or in September, but all the other locations will be selling passes.
And repeat those locations again for the
So there's the Shemeketa Community College, the bookstore, who may or may not start next week. So they're out of school, so they usually do it
Right.
during the school session. Many Roths locations sell passes. What else?
Cherriots Customer Services, the Safeway in Dallas, and Wilsonville City Hall.
Oh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And with that, we'll proceed to the Board of Directors reports, and from Zone 1, Director Nguyen.
Thank you, President Davidson. From the DEI subcommittee, I know that we are now engaged with Clean Independent Research, and they have already begun setting up one-on-one interviews with the DEI subcommittee members. So more to come there. And I apologize for kind of flipping back, but something came to mind of General Manager Pollock from this past for agenda item J, as it concerns the siting of the South Center. The thought is where we want to provide world-class service. One innovation that I experienced when traveling to Tokyo and Seoul is that they were able to site these stops with the ability to install PV panels, solar panels on top of the stops as a protection against the environment, but all the while it's collecting heat so that it is used to then radiate heat for the seating area during the night and bad weather. So that came to mind, so I apologize for rewinding back to Agenda J, but that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Nguyen. Director Bush.
I'll try and be brief. Thank you again, directors, for the opportunity to serve with each of you, and I will continue on serving. I look forward to my new adventures. This past month, I did spend some time with the different chambers and just saying, see you later, and enjoyed working with you, and it's been fun. I was able to do a service project with the United Way, Toys for Tots. Received 16,000 toys to disperse at this time of the year, and so they organized through United Way and the Good 360 program, as well as, and this is a program that our United States Marines participate in as well. And so my husband and I helped to sort toys for the different nonprofits, children's services organizations in the area, like Boys and Girls Clubs and that kind of thing. And then we got to see them being picked up and headed out the door. That was great. Then I spent a few hours at Office Depot in South Salem. They were highlighting Cherriots as one of the top businesses for the month. And I sat at a table and talked with many people and heard the same kinds of things that were discussed about the South Salem Transit Center. That was good to hear it reinforced tonight. Our Southeast Kaiser Neighborhood Association actually was met this month, and that was exciting to get together and talk. And plan National Night Out, which is coming up. So those plans are in the works all across the area. August 3rd, I believe. And then when Cherriots hosted the Kaiser Chamber Greeters, thank you, President Davidson, for your introduction, and Director Allen for being there, and Lisa and Roxanne gave a great presentation of all of our services, and I got to say, yes, let's go on, let's move on. So. And then a very moving Marion County Commissioners meeting was held yesterday morning at 9 o'clock. They did, again, a video of their year in review, and they showed all of the volunteers and staff and people who were involved in the pandemic response, the fires response, and the ice storm response. So as a community, I see that we are very resilient, and we are ready to move on and keep loving and living and making each other stay connected, so we can do that. So, and I'm done.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bush. Director Carney.
Thank you, President Davidson, and thank you, Directors Krebs and Bush, for your service and your leadership in our community. I have known Director Krebs since my first weeks in Salem, and I'm very inspired by all you have done for the community, both of you. I mean, when I think about the service you have offered to Kaiser, Director Bush, I think it was last year you received the Volunteer of the Year award, and I can't understand why you wouldn't just say year after year after year. It's been a pleasure serving with you both, so thank you so much. So in the last month, on June 9th, I did attend the zoning subcommittee meeting for the Our Salem project. The next meeting I plan to attend is on Thursday, July 15th from 3 to 5. Again, the zoning subcommittee is meeting to talk about adjustments there. Otherwise, earlier this week, I was able to attend the SCATS policy meeting, though due to some contractor difficulties on my property, I was a few minutes late showing up to that. On their agenda this month, we had 2 TIP amendments, one that reduced the length of a project corridor, and one that removed the Wheatland Ferry project from our current TIP, which is up in Kaiser, though it remains a priority project for Kaiser itself in their transportation plan. We discussed OMPOC legislative priorities, the strategy they are following to update their public engagement program over the coming months. The process, where we are in the process of receiving and using the COVID relief funds. I talked to this group last month about SCATS or the COG sending in a letter of support saying that we supported ODOT's methodology in determining how the funds could be allocated, whether it was on population. I don't know if anybody remembers, but that's continuing to go through. And then we talked about some ODOT enhanced projects. And I asked a question about how highway widening projects aligned with the discussion we had just had about the OMPOC legislative priorities. And ODOT got into this big long answer for me, but my Zoom was failing. I was trying to connect my phone. And so now I'm just gonna have to read the minutes to figure out what the lengthy response was to my sort of challenging that or pointing out the inconsistency. So look forward to that. And lastly, SCATS added the Salem-Keizer School Board as a member, as a signatory in their cooperative agreements, because by some oversight they had just been overlooked long ago and overlooked no longer. And that was it for me. End of report.
Thank you, Director Carney. Director Hinojosa-Pressey.
So we had the Citizens Advisory Committee. It was on June 15th, and some highlights is the committee welcomed a new member, which is Michelle Rowland Schwartz. Really excited to have her on. She's a great addition. And Parametrics led a presentation and discussion on South Salem Transit Center and Mobility Hub project, just like they just gave us as well. Provided an update to the committee on their progress. Parametrics engaged the committee on their initial findings along with some potential concepts. There was a brief discussion about potential amenities to be considered for the project depending on the actual design. General Manager Alan Pollock gave a presentation on Cherriots' organizational priorities, which staff will focus on as the district rebounds from the results of COVID-19. The committee was given an update on the battery electric bus project. Staff discussed all project activities, and staff also told committee members that they would be invited to tour the Dell Web Operations Headquarters to see the charging stations once installed, in addition to taking a ride on the new electric vehicles when they arrive in July 2022, which, you know, since I came on board during the pandemic, I haven't really gotten to tour any of the headquarters, so I'm excited about that as well. Staff also presented ridership data to the committee. The committee had a brief discussion about current ridership trends during the pandemic. Our Director of Operations, Tom Dietz, delivered a report on all actions taken by Cherriots over the past 15 months to instill confidence for employees and riders on the safety of our service and our facilities. The committee discussed rider confidence and whether committee members or their constituents had any concerns about returning to our service. Most members had no real concerns and felt really good about Cherriots' ability to move forward beyond the pandemic. And the committee discussed its work plan activities with a focus on 3 elements of the plan, which is awareness and sensitivity to the needs of seniors and persons with disabilities on the service, safety and security, and signage, including Braille and printed schedules. And our next meeting will be September 21st. And that concludes my report.
Great. Thank you, Director Hinojosa-Pressey. I'm next up. So earlier this week, the City of Salem Climate Action Plan Task Force met, and I'm a member of that. A couple highlights that I wanted to point out was that, so the meeting on Wednesday was about refining the strategies, and we spent 2 hours as a 40-person body refining some of those strategies. And one of the key takeaways that I wanted to highlight tonight was that there was a general recognition that transportation, as well as energy, but transportation in particular, is the difficult thing or the important thing to tackle. And so that recognition is really helpful. I think the city is beginning to show certainly through this process, take concrete steps to address that. So I'm excited for the role that Cherriots can play in that. To the point that Chair Kathy Lincoln made earlier about bike lanes and their safety, one of the strategies that I pushed hard for was the development of what I will call a spine of protected bike lanes. So a north, south, and an east, west. Right now we have some bicycle infrastructure facilities that are pretty good in spots, but then they terminate after several blocks or after a mile. And I think until we get a corridor that's actually protected, you will not see the ridership or the people rolling, whether that's on bikes, scooters, or rollerblades that you would hope. And so that's something I'm working on offline. Hopefully at a future meeting I can talk more about that. But we also had the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments board meeting as well as our budget meeting earlier this month. Not too much to report there. The budget was approved, and the executive director is, he's got a couple good feet under himself, and he's, General Manager Pollock and I have had some discussions with him about how Cherriots can partner with the COG, and so I'm excited about that. And then wanted to also talk about MWAC, which occurred at the first part of the month, so the Mid-Willamette Valley Advisory Commission on Transportation. A couple of the items that were discussed that are relevant to you all are we also, like at SCATS that Director Carney talked about, we did discuss the population forecast issue, which has all sorts of side effects. If the population forecast is not correct, it impacts a whole host of things. We also talked about the STIP. I also asked, maybe not asked quite of a direct question, but a similar question about highway widening. And we also discussed the ODOT active transportation needs inventory. And so as you all may recall, several months ago, actually it might have been a year ago at this point, time is awfully fluid now. But at a previous meeting, you authorized me to sign a letter or send a letter to the Oregon Transportation Commission about how they would divvy up their funding for future years. And one of the results of that, based on, I think, our efforts and the efforts of many others, is that the funding for active transportation increased significantly. Now, active transportation is a broad umbrella term that includes public transportation. And so we were briefed at MWAC about the needs inventory that they're conducting to then inform some of the decision-making that'll happen. So very exciting to see that. And then that really was at least the agenda that's relevant to you all. So, and I think that concludes my report for this month. So thank you. Next up is Director Krebs.
Oh, thank you. I was on vacation part of the month, so I didn't do as many neighborhood associations as I usually do. I didn't do any, in fact. But I did attend the same SCATS meeting that Director Carney did. And in respect to that $10 million for highway widening, that is for the section of I-5 south of Kubler to the next stretch, and it's just a short distance there, about a mile or two, so that there'll be 3 lanes all the way, and it's being put in because one of the problems is climbing that hill by Kubler. The trucks slow down the other traffic, and that'll provide the 3rd lane for the trucks. But that's been on the books for quite a while, and it's not the total project for $10 million. That's a additional amount to cover a shortfall on the basic project. So, it's nice to get that done. I don't drive that stretch of I-5 very often because I live in South Salem, so I usually come off before Kubler. But will increase traffic flow in that area. So now you can go back and look at the, but that was the idea, and it was an addition to the monies that are already allotted to that project. I did attend the streetcar committee, and everybody knows I'm a streetcar advocate, but I didn't set up the committee. There's a group, grassroots movement here in Salem that's interested in streetcars, and it's basically a group that's interested in serving West Salem with a streetcar system, and this would probably require a river crossing because in order for the system to be efficient and serve enough people to make it worthwhile building, you have to connect the major parts of the community. And of course, most of the people, or 40 to 50% of the people driving over the bridges go within a mile of the east side of the bridges. That means they go to downtown businesses, they go to the hospital, they go to the state government area, or they go to the intermodal station at Amtrak Greyhound, and Willamette University. So you could construct a 1.5 mile streetcar system that would connect all these points. And I'm not going to start talking about drawing lines on the map because then somebody says I don't want it in my backyard. But there are several possibilities for crossing the river, and those might include putting a track on the Union Street Railroad Bridge, maybe on top of the girders, so we retain the sidewalk on the lower level. And it could mean hanging a track on 1 or 2 of the highway bridges, or it could mean building a new bridge across the river, or it could even mean putting a subway under the river. So there's a whole bunch of options there, and hopefully in the future there's going to be some sort of preliminary study to look at building a streetcar system. Now, I do advocate for a lot of things, but I also, when I advocate, I see an economic value to the community. And if there isn't an economic value to the community, it isn't worth spending the dollars on. Because right now we run buses and they run on streets that are paid for by another agency. As soon as we build a streetcar system, Salem Kaiser Transit will be paying for all the infrastructure plus the power system. So there is a lot more costs involved, but there is a lot of benefits too, because it is a system that stimulates economic growth. And I'd like to, in my last recent trip, I used to live in Michigan for a few years, and it's kind of a funny story because I got a job in Michigan, moved from Portland to Michigan, and then the economy went in the garbage can, and so I moved from Michigan to Salem. So I always tell everybody I moved 5,000 miles to move 50. But anyway, I've lived in Salem for over 30 years now, but I am a native Oregonian. The thing about streetcars is that the poster child for streetcars is the Portland streetcar system. And if you toured other streetcar systems like Atlanta, the new Milwaukee system, and several other systems, they're all patterned after the Portland system. In fact, they even have their servicing facility underneath the freeway. So it's very simple. But hopefully we're going to have a streetcar here in Salem. It might take 5 or 10 years, but it will be a real boon. And building a streetcar river crossing, I like to say, is not an alternative to the third bridge. It is a transit oriented thing to increase economic development and to provide mobility for our community. And I'm excited about it. And as I leave the ward, I will hopefully still be participating in the streetcar committee. And with that, that's about all I did. I might say that when I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, not Oregon, that's the one with 2 E's. We had a streetcar right by our hotel, so we just walk out the door of the hotel, get on the streetcar, take our bags, and go down to the intermodal station at the end of the streetcar line and check our bags on the train. So it was very nice. We didn't even have to take a cab from the hotel to the train station. But had a very good trip, and this was my second trip out of state since coronavirus. So we're getting back to the new normal. And again, I would like to thank everybody on the staff and my fellow board members for working with me, and I've enjoyed my time on the board, and it's been a privilege to serve with you.
Thank you, Director Krebs. Director Richards.
Well, normally I would be a lot more transportation oriented, but something happened for all of you. You probably don't realize it, but this year has been a very good year for seniors and people with disabilities. We have gotten money like you have never seen. It has been, and I've been working with Northwest Senior Services for all these years, 11 years, and sometimes a bad situation turns into a better situation, and that's exactly what happened here between the forest fires and the pandemic, the problem with all the illness and everything. A lot of seniors are going to be taken care of a lot better, and we better enjoy it, because this, in the government systems, about 3 years in, you're going to lose it again. So, but it is going to be good, and senior people are going to get the kind of transportation. There will be transportation that will be different money set out from different places, and it will make a difference, and these people are going to have it. And if you work around these people, you see how hard they have to work to keep up with just food to eat and a place to get from point A to point B. And one of my favorite things is we're going to get Sunday service, and we'll have people being able to go to church who haven't gone for 18 months. So it's really exciting, and I promise you that I'll try to work harder for the transportation side next time around, but because I'm done with the other Wednesdays. So, but it is, the money is unusual, to say the least.
Great. Thank you, Director Richards. And with that, that concludes our agenda for this evening. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to staff that have worked behind the scenes to make this what it is. And thank you very much to Director Krebs and to Director Bush for your many years of service. And in your honor, I dedicate this meeting. With that, we're adjourned.